Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with reference recordings. And today we're talking about Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1, one of the perennial favorites. And you know, there's a problem with pieces in the concerto repertoire particularly that are that popular. And the big problem is simply that there are so many good recordings of them that they all cancel each other out. And it's hard to find one which is a reference. And if there is a reference, it's a reference in a rather special way. And this is a case in point, because the reference recording for Tchaikovsky's first piano concerto is this one. It's Van Cliburn with the RCA Symphony Orchestra under Kirill Kondrashin, recorded in, it was like, well, what was it recorded here? They have to tell me. There's got to be a date. Oh, well, of course, they don't put the date on the back. Don't you wish they'd give you, complete regular recording information so that we could, not have to waste time? Well, of course, I could look in advance, too. It's my fault. I know, I'm just lazy. 1958 in Carnegie Hall. So there you go. And this was, possibly the biggest selling classical record, ever, certainly in the United States. I don't think there was anything that even came close. And the reason was, as you all know, and for those of you who are young'uns and just starting with classical music, it's hard to describe the aura of mystery that surrounded this recording, because Van Cliburn won the first international Tchaikovsky competition. He had to get approval of Nikita Khrushchev at the time in order to win, because the Russians were supposed to win. And it was not going to be a fair and honest competition, but it wound up being one, much to everybody's enormous surprise. And it caused an international sensation. The Cold War was at its height. The USSR and the USA were at each other's throats. And into that political hotbed sailed Van Cliburn, a young, tall Texan with his sort of aw shucks attitude, and he just enchanted the Russians and got a ticker tape parade here in the United States. Probably, I think it was the first ever afforded a classical musician. And then he made this recording for RCA. And, well, the rest is history. It became the instant reference recording for Tchaikovsky's first piano concerto. I'm not sure it was anybody's favorite among the people who really knew Tchaikovsky's first piano concerto. It was the only one for the millions and millions of people who purchased it who would not otherwise have even bothered with Tchaikovsky's first piano concerto. They bought it for patriotic, sentimental, political, whatever reasons. They weren't strictly musical. And that enormous publicity and political aspect of the entire thing is what made it the reference recording. It's a very good recording. It really is. Cliburn had a sad career, as we know. He was in demand only to play the pieces that he won at the Tchaikovsky competitions, the things he played there. This and the Rachmaninoff Third Concerto, basically. And although he tried to broaden out his repertoire and do other things, nobody wanted to hear him do other things. And his own musical development seemed to stop at that point. He was always a sort of big-boned, spontaneous, genuine romantic with a fabulous technique who wasn't much given to thinking about things. That doesn't mean he was stupid. It just meant he loved the music and he enjoyed playing it up to a point anyway in his career. And he was not given to introspection. We just put it nicely. So his performances, reflect that. They are classic romantic performances, moderate tempos, a big beefy sound, plenty of technique, a beautiful singing line as often as not. That's a lot. That's a lot. It's a lot of good stuff. He was not the American Lang Lang, for example. He did not want to be an entertainer. He had enormous concern, for example, for bringing classical music to young people and for doing things like that. But he always remained a very serious musician when it came to his own his own art anyway, and he didn't do anything to cheapen it. But by the same token, as time got on, grew on, he became less and less able to deal with the pressure, the tension, the constant, the grind of being such a celebrated musician at such a young age. And it ruined him, basically. He retired for a long time. He made a few comebacks, always to play the same stuff, basically. I mean, that was all that there was left at the end, and it was really very sad. I really think so. Nonetheless, he made a few fine recordings, and this Tchaikovsky First is probably the best of them, or it's among the best of them for sure. First of all, you've got Kirill Kondrashin, who's a terrific conductor and a wonderful accompanist. So that's wonderful that he was around to do these things. And he also made some recordings around this time in the United States, which is really great. And some of those are great. Absolutely was a Capriccio Espagnol that's just insane. It's wonderful. And Cliburn himself passed into the realm of legend. He almost ceased to be a person. And I remember vividly, listening to this recording when I was a kid and thinking, gee, I liked Arthur Rubinstein better. And I liked other people better. And probably the best version of all is Martha Argerich with Claudio Abbado on Deutsche Grammophon. That's a much more recent one. But there was an earlier one she did with Dutoit. There were always fine recordings of this concerto buzzing around with other pianists, which were arguably more impressive, coming both out of the United States and out of Europe. But that doesn't change what the reference recording is. And so, as I've said so many times in talking about these pieces, it doesn't have to be the best recording. It doesn't have to be a great performance even, although this is, like I said, a very fine performance. It has to be the one that everyone recognized as the one. And few performances, if anything, by anyone, have been more recognized as the one than this. The Cliburn Tchaikovsky First Piano Concerto with Kirill Kondrashin and the NBC Symphony Orchestra on RCA. It's been in print forever. It's been nicely promoted. Even after Cliburn gave up playing and ceased to be an important figure, this remained an important recording, which just goes to show how significant non-musical considerations can be in making something a reference recording and maintaining its status on the pedestal after that happens. Because nothing that's going to happen between now and the end of time, I predict, is going to eclipse this as the reference Tchaikovsky First Piano Concerto, even though there will be others that we prefer. And even at classicstoday.com, when I say what's the reference recording, I don't refer to this. I refer to one of the Argeriches or something else like that because there's a difference between the historical reference recording, which is what this series is about, and your own personal reference, the one that you use. And I know that there are probably a lot of people now in the classical music world that haven't heard this, and they should. They really should, because you also need to keep in mind that in the 1950s and 60s, these pops pieces, these pieces that were really, really popular, were very well known to a huge, huge audience of listeners that were not specifically classical music listeners. Remember the opening of this concerto became a popular song, "Tonight we love while the stars are shining." I don't know, it does things like that. And so people knew Tchaikovsky and loved him, and they loved this concerto, and he was the guy doing the concerto. And so there was the potential for a much deeper penetration of a classical work into the general musical consciousness of the country. And that's what happened here. It was really, really a special event. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. And here's a chance to get to know what the reference recording was if you don't already know. Take care.